Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
They say marriage is like a game of chess. Strategic, patient, requiring you to think 3 moves ahead. What they don't tell you is that sometimes your opponent has been cheating from the very beginning, and you're the last person to figure it out. My name is Elliot Grady, and I'm an IT consultant who fixes other people's broken systems for a living. Turns out I should have been paying more attention to the broken system in my own house. The first clue came on a Tuesday evening in October. I'd finished debugging a server crash for a law firm downtown and decided to surprise Vanessa with takeout from that Thai place she loves. Our house sits on Maple Street, one of those neighborhoods where the American dream went to get a little shabby around the edges. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, except apparently I didn't know my own. Turn. I pulled into our driveway at 6:30, earlier than usual. The living room lights were on, and I could hear voices through the thin walls. Vanessa's laugh, that bright, musical sound that first made me fall for her 8 years ago, mixed with a deeper voice I recognized immediately. Kevin Yates, my best friend since college, my groomsman, the guy who'd helped me move furniture into this very house 3 years ago. I stood on my own front porch, holding containers of pad thai, and listened to my wife giggle like a teenager. Nothing necessarily wrong with that, except Vanessa hadn't laughed that way with me in months. These days, our conversations revolved around mortgage payments, her marketing job stress, and my apparently endless collection of character flaws. The smart move would have been to walk in, say hello, and pretend everything was normal. Instead, I crept around to the kitchen window, like some kind of suburban spy. Through the gap in our yellow curtains, I watched Vanessa lean against our kitchen counter, while Kevin stood maybe 6 inches too close for a married woman and her husband's best friend. Elliot never has to know, Kevin was saying, his voice low and conspiratorial. Vanessa nodded, tucking a strand of her auburn hair behind her ear. He's so wrapped up in his computer work anyway. Sometimes I think he'd rather troubleshoot code than talk to me. That stung, mostly because it wasn't entirely untrue, but hearing her say it to Kevin, in that tone, made something cold settle in my chest. I backed away from the window and walked around to the front door, making sure to jingle my keys loudly before entering. "Honey, I'm home," I called out, like some sitcom husband. "In the kitchen." Vanessa's voice was bright and normal, no trace of the intimate tone I'd heard moments before. I found them standing on opposite sides of the kitchen island now, a respectable distance apart. Kevin had his hands shoved in his pockets, and Vanessa was wiping down counters that already looked clean. "Hey, Elle," Kevin grinned, all teeth and practiced charm. "Just stopped by to see if you wanted to grab a beer this weekend." "Sure," I said, setting down the takeout bags. "What were you two talking about? I heard voices from outside." "Oh, just work stuff," Vanessa said quickly. "Kevin's company is looking for a new marketing consultant, and I was giving him some advice." Kevin nodded along. "Yeah, boring business talk. You know how it is." I knew how it was, all right. I also knew that Kevin worked in pharmaceutical sales, and Vanessa specialized in restaurant marketing, so their professional overlap was roughly equivalent to a fish consulting on mountain climbing techniques. But I smiled and nodded like the trusting husband I was supposed to be. "Well, don't let me interrupt. Kevin, you staying for dinner?" "Nah, I should head out," he said, already moving toward the door. "Thanks for the advice, Vanessa. I'll let you know how it goes." After he left, Vanessa and I ate our Thai food in relative silence. She scrolled through her phone between bites, occasionally showing me pictures of her coworker Brittany's latest social media posts. Brittany was one of those people who documented every meal, every outfit, every random thought for her 1,000 followers. "She's thinking about starting a lifestyle blog," Vanessa said, holding up a photo of Brittany posing with an overpriced coffee drink. "I told her she should go for it. She's got the personality for it." "What kind of lifestyle?" I asked. "You know, fashion, relationships, career advice, girl stuff." I nodded and went back to my pad thai. But my mind was elsewhere. Something about the kitchen scene bothered me beyond the obvious weirdness of their conversation. It took me until we were loading the dishwasher to figure out what it was. Kevin's jacket had been draped over one of our kitchen chairs, not hanging on the back like a visitor might do, but draped casually, like he'd been planning to stay a while. Like he was comfortable enough in my house to make himself at home. That night, after Vanessa fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and thinking about chess moves. In chess, the most dangerous opponent is the one who can make you think you're winning right up until the moment they corner your king. I'd been playing defense my whole marriage, trying to be the good husband, the reliable provider, the guy who fixed things when they broke. But maybe it was time to start playing offense. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before in 8 years of marriage. While Vanessa was in the shower, I looked at her phone. She'd left it charging on her nightstand, and she'd never been paranoid about passwords. Her unlock code was our anniversary date, which would have been romantic if I hadn't been using it to spy on her. Her text messages told a story I really didn't want to read. Weeks of conversations with Kevin, starting innocent enough but getting progressively more intimate. Inside jokes, plans to meet up, complaints about me that made my stomach twist. The most recent exchange was from the night before, after Kevin had left our house. Kevin, close call tonight. Thought he might have heard us. Vanessa, he's oblivious, always has been. Kevin, still think we should be more careful. Relax. Elliot trusts you completely. He'd never suspect his best friend. I set the phone back exactly where I'd found it, and got dressed for work like it was any other day. But something had shifted inside me. The trusting husband was gone, replaced by someone colder and more calculating. At work, I couldn't concentrate on code. Instead, I found myself researching things I'd never thought about before. Phone monitoring software, cloud backup recovery, digital forensics. My coworker Frankie noticed my distraction around lunchtime. Frankie Rodriguez, wait, that name's not allowed. Let me call him Frankie Miller. Frankie Miller was an ex-cop who'd gotten into IT security after 20 years on the force. He had the kind of suspicious mind that came from seeing too much human nature in action. You look like someone who just found out Santa Claus is real. But he's been stealing from your house instead of leaving presents, Frankie said, dropping into the chair next to my desk. Just relationship stuff, I said. Frankie raised an eyebrow. The kind of relationship stuff where you need to know how to recover deleted text messages. I looked at my computer screen, where I'd forgotten I had a browser tab open to a digital forensics tutorial. Maybe, I admitted. Frankie was quiet for a moment, then leaned closer. Elliot, I've seen a lot of marriages go south. The guys who handle it best are the ones who get their facts straight before they make any moves. You want some advice? I nodded. Document everything. Don't confront anybody until you know exactly what you're dealing with. And whatever you do, don't let them know you're onto them until you're ready to play your hand. What if what I find is worse than I think? Frankie shrugged. Then at least you'll know the truth. And truth is power, my friend. The question is what you plan to do with it. That evening, I stopped by an electronics store on my way home. I bought a small digital voice recorder, the kind that could stick to the underside of a table and pick up conversations from across a room. I also picked up a wireless security camera disguised as a phone charger. Vanessa was working late, which gave me time to set up my surveillance equipment. I felt like a creep, but I also felt like a man who was finally taking control of his own life. The voice recorder went under our kitchen table. The camera went on the bookshelf in our living room, positioned to capture the couch and entryway. I tested both devices to make sure they were working, then deleted the test files and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Thursday evening, Vanessa announced that she was going to Brittany's apartment for a girls' night. She'd be home late, probably after I was asleep. Don't wait up, she said, kissing my cheek with what I now recognized as guilty affection. 20 minutes after she left, Kevin's car pulled into our driveway. I watched from our bedroom window as he used a key to my house that I'd never given him, to let himself in through our front door. The security camera captured everything. Kevin walking into my living room like he owned the place, making himself a drink from my liquor cabinet, settling onto my couch. To watch my television. An hour later, Vanessa came home. The voice recorder captured their conversation perfectly. Did you tell Brittany you were staying the night? Kevin asked. She's covering for me, Vanessa replied. Posted some photos on her social media to make it look like we're having a girls' night. If Elliot checks, he'll see us together at her place. You think he's suspicious? Please. Elliot couldn't find a clue if it was gift-wrapped and sitting on his desk. He's too busy with his computers to pay attention to real life. They talked for another hour, making plans I didn't want to hear about my own house, my own marriage, my own future. They discussed how to handle the Elliot problem when they were ready to be together officially. They talked about my savings account, our joint investments, and how to make sure Vanessa got the house in a divorce. By the time they went upstairs to my bedroom, I had enough evidence to end my marriage and destroy my friendship. But I also had something else, a plan. See? The thing about being an IT consultant is that you learn to think systematically. You identify the problem, you analyze all the contributing factors, and then you implement a solution that addresses the root cause, not just the symptoms. My problem wasn't just that my wife was cheating. My problem was that both of them thought I was too stupid and too weak to fight back. They'd built their whole strategy around the assumption that I'd roll over and take whatever they decided to dish out. Time to prove them wrong. Friday morning, I woke up before my alarm and lay in bed next to Vanessa, listening to her breathe. She looked peaceful, almost innocent, with her hair spread across the pillow and her face relaxed in sleep. If I hadn't heard the recordings from the night before, I might have convinced myself I'd imagined everything. But I had heard them, and now I had to decide what to do about it. The old Elliot would have confronted them directly, demanded explanations, probably ended up apologizing somehow for driving them into each other's arms. The old Elliot was a fixer who believed every problem had a reasonable solution if you just talked it through. The new Elliot understood that some problems required a different kind of solution. I got up quietly and went through my morning routine like any other day. Shower, coffee, check email, kiss Vanessa goodbye as she rushed off to her marketing job. She was meeting a client for lunch, she said. Probably be home late again. I nodded and wished her a good day, then waited until her car disappeared around the corner before I got to work. First stop, our bank. I moved half of our joint savings into an individual account, which was perfectly legal since both our names were on the original account. I also discovered that Vanessa had been moving small amounts of money into a separate account I didn't know about. Not enough to trigger any alerts, but it added up to several thousand over the past 6 months. Interesting. She'd been planning her exit strategy longer than I'd realized. Second stop, a consultation with a divorce attorney. Not because I'd decided to file for divorce, but because I needed to understand my options. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Wells, listened to my story without judgment. "Do you want to save the marriage?" she asked. "I want to save myself," I said. "The marriage is already over. I just didn't know it until this week." Then my advice is to document everything, protect your assets, and don't do anything that could be used against you later. No matter how angry you get, stay smart. Emotional decisions lead to expensive mistakes. I liked Patricia. She understood that divorce was a strategic game, not a therapy session. Third stop, Frankie's apartment. I needed an ally, someone who understood the rules of engagement when trust had broken down completely. Frankie lived in a converted warehouse downtown, the kind of place that looked rough from the outside but was surprisingly comfortable inside. He answered the door with a beer in his hand, despite it being only 2 in the afternoon. "You look like a man with a plan," he said, stepping aside to let me in. I showed him the recordings and explained what I'd discovered. Frankie listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disgust. "So what's your endgame here?" he asked when I finished. "I want them to understand what it feels like to be underestimated," I said. "They think I'm some kind of harmless computer nerd who'll just roll over and take whatever they decide to do to me. I want to prove them wrong. Revenge, in other words. Justice," I corrected. "They made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences." Frankie was quiet for a moment, then smiled slowly. "You know what I like about you, Elliot? You're not asking me to talk you out of this. Most guys in your situation want someone to tell them to take the high road, be the better person, all that nonsense." "The high road is overrated," I said. "Damn right it is. So what do you need from me?" We spent the next 2 hours planning. Frankie had skills from his police days that complemented my technical abilities. More importantly, he had the kind of suspicious, tactical mindset that I was still developing. "The key is to control the narrative," he explained. "Right now, they think they're writing the story. Cheating wife, oblivious husband, tragic but predictable ending. You need to flip the script." "How?" "By making sure everyone else sees what you see. They're counting on this staying private until they're ready to go public on their terms. Take that control away from them. That evening, Vanessa came home with takeout Chinese food and a guilty smile. Thought we could have a quiet night in, she said, unpacking containers of lo mein and sweet and sour chicken. Sounds perfect, I said. How was your day? Oh, same old stuff. Meetings, client calls, the usual chaos. She was a good liar. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed her completely. She asked about my day, listened to my made-up stories about server crashes and software updates, even laughed at my jokes. It was almost like the early days of our marriage, when we actually enjoyed each other's company.
She texted you come back to bed at 3 a.m. Last Tuesday, you told me you were at your sister's.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Almost. After dinner, she curled up next to me on the couch to watch a movie, some romantic comedy she'd been wanting to see. I put my arm around her and tried to remember what it felt like when that gesture was natural instead of strategic. I love you, she said during a quiet moment in the film. I love you too, I replied automatically. And the terrible thing was, part of me still meant it. Even knowing what I knew, even planning what I was planning, I still felt something for the woman I'd married. Not enough to forgive her, but enough to make this whole situation hurt in ways I hadn't expected. Saturday morning brought our weekly ritual, game night at the boardroom, a cafe downtown that specialized in coffee, craft beer, and tabletop games. We'd been going there almost every Saturday for 2 years, usually with Kevin and whatever woman he was dating, plus a rotating cast of friends and acquaintances. It was our social hub, the place where everyone in our circle gathered to catch up on gossip, try new games, and pretend we were all still young and carefree. Vanessa loved it because she was naturally social and competitive. I'd grown to love it because it was one of the few places where she still seemed genuinely happy to be with me. Today, though, I had a different reason for looking forward to game night. We arrived at 7, our usual time. The boardroom was packed with its typical Saturday crowd. College students, young professionals, families with older kids. Our regular table in the back corner was waiting, reserved under Kevin's name. Kevin was already there, along with Brittany and a few other regulars. He stood up to greet us with his usual enthusiasm, hugging Vanessa just a little too long and clapping me on the back like the good friend he was pretending to be. "Iliot, ready to lose at Settlers of Catan again?" "Actually," I said, settling into my chair, "I was thinking we might try something different tonight." I reached into my messenger bag and pulled out a manila folder, thick with papers. I set it on the table in the center of our group, right where everyone could see it. "What's that?" Brittany asked, already reaching for her phone to document whatever was about to happen. "A new game," I said. "I call it Truth or Consequences." Vanessa was looking at the folder with a puzzled expression. "Honey, what are you talking about?" "It's simple," I said, opening the folder to reveal printed screenshots of text messages, bank statements, and security camera photos. Everyone gets to see what's really been going on, and then we all decide what happens next. The table went completely quiet. Even the ambient noise of the cafe seemed to fade as our friends leaned forward to see what I'd laid out in front of them. Kevin's face went pale. "Iliot, what is this?" "This," I said, pointing to a particularly explicit text exchange, "is you and my wife planning your future together in my house, with my money, behind my back." Win-win. Vanessa grabbed for the papers, but I was faster. "These are private conversations. You had no right." "I had every right," I interrupted. "It's my house, my marriage, and my life you've been playing with." The people at nearby tables were starting to stare. Brittany had her phone out, recording everything. This was exactly what I'd hoped for. Kevin tried to salvage the situation. "Look, this is all a misunderstanding. Maybe we should talk about this privately." "No," I said firmly. "We're going to talk about it right here, right now, in front of everyone. Because that's what you get when you decide to make a fool out of someone. You get to be embarrassed in public." "Elliot, please," Vanessa said, her voice breaking. "Can we just go home and discuss this like adults?" "Adults?" I laughed, and it came out harder than I'd intended. "Adults don't sneak around behind their spouse's back. Adults don't give house keys to their lover. Adults don't plan to steal half of everything their partner has worked for." I stood up, gathering the papers back into the folder. "But you know what? You're right about one thing. This conversation is over." I looked around the table at our friends, most of whom were staring in shock. "Just so everyone knows, Vanessa and Kevin have been having an affair for months. They've been using my house for their meetings while lying to me about where they were. They've been planning to divorce me and split my assets. And they've been laughing about how stupid and trusting I am. Brittany was still recording, her eyes wide with the kind of excitement that comes from witnessing prime social media content. The game is over, I continued. At least, the game where I pretend not to know what's happening in my own life. From now on, we're playing by different rules. I walked out of the boardroom, leaving Vanessa and Kevin to deal with the aftermath. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa crying and Kevin trying to explain, but their voices were drowned out by the excited chatter of everyone else processing what they'd just witnessed. My phone started buzzing before I reached my car. Text messages, missed calls, social media notifications. Word was already spreading. Good. Let it spread. Let everyone know exactly who they were dealing with. The old game was over. The new game was just beginning. Sunday morning, I woke up alone. Vanessa's side of the bed was empty, her pillow cold. I found a note on the kitchen counter written in her careful handwriting. Staying at Brittany's until we can talk like civilized people. What you did last night was cruel and unnecessary. Call me when you're ready to apologize. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. Then I made coffee and checked my phone. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages. My social media accounts were blowing up with friend requests, comments, and private messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, Brittany's recording from the boardroom had made its way onto several platforms overnight. Most of the messages were supportive, which surprised me. I'd expected people to think I was the villain in this story. Instead, I was getting comments like, "Good for you, man," and "She had it coming." And Kevin always seemed like a snake. Interesting. Maybe I wasn't as alone in this as I'd thought. Kevin had sent me 6 increasingly desperate text messages. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. I never meant for it to happen this way. Please call me back. Your wife is devastated. You're destroying people's lives over a mistake. A mistake. That's what he was calling months of planning and deception. A mistake. I deleted his messages without responding. Monday morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. But of course, something had happened, and news travels fast in our small professional community. By lunchtime, 3 different coworkers had asked me if I was okay, and my boss had pulled me aside to make sure my personal situation wasn't going to affect my performance. Take whatever time you need, she said. Divorce is never easy. I hadn't mentioned divorce, but apparently everyone was assuming that's where this was headed. Maybe they were right. Frankie found me in the break room around 2 o'clock, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. You magnificent lunatic, he said, dropping into the chair across from me. I saw the video. That was beautiful. It was necessary, I said. Oh, it was more than necessary. It was art. The way you just laid it all out there, calm as anything, while they scrambled to explain themselves. Chef's kiss. Phase 1 is complete, I said. Now comes the interesting part. Which is making sure they understand that public humiliation was just the appetizer. That evening, I drove to Brittany's apartment complex. I didn't go up to her door. I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. I just wanted to see if Vanessa's car was there. It was, parked in a visitor spot near the building entrance. Good. Let her hide at her friend's place and lick her wounds. It would give me time to work. I spent the next few days implementing what Frankie and I had started calling Operation Consequences. It was a multi-pronged approach designed to make Vanessa and Kevin understand that actions have repercussions. First, I changed all the passwords on our shared accounts. Streaming services, online shopping, cloud storage. Everything that Vanessa had been taking for granted suddenly required credentials she didn't have. Small inconveniences, but they would add up. Second, I canceled the credit cards that were in my name but that she'd been using. Her gym membership, her monthly subscription boxes, her frequent coffee shop purchases. All of it would start getting declined. Third, I had a locksmith come to the house and change all the exterior locks. If Kevin had a key, he didn't anymore. If Vanessa wanted back in, she'd have to ask nicely. Fourth, and most importantly, I started documenting everything for the divorce proceedings that were looking increasingly inevitable. Bank records, property assessments, evidence of her affair, all of it organized and copied for Patricia Wells. Wednesday evening, my phone rang. Vanessa's number. Hello, I said. Elliot. Her voice was strained, exhausted. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can I come home? Can we sit down like adults and figure this out? This is your home too, I said. But I changed the locks. Silence for a moment. Why would you do that? Because Kevin had a key to my house, and I didn't give it to him. Which means you did. Which means I don't know who else might have access to my property. That's not why I gave him a key. I know exactly why you gave him a key, Vanessa. The question is whether you're ready to have an honest conversation about it. Another pause. Can I come over, please? Give me an hour, I said, and hung up. I used that hour to set up my phone to record our conversation. If we were going to talk, I wanted a record of what was said. Vanessa arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, looking like she hadn't slept much since Saturday night. She was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual carefully coordinated outfits, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. I let her in, and we sat in our living room, on opposite ends of the couch that had been the scene of so many of her conversations with Kevin. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. What happened between Kevin and me, it wasn't supposed to happen. But it did happen, I said, for months, in our house, in our bed, with our friends covering for you. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. I felt invisible, she finally said. In our marriage, in my job, in my life, like I was just going through the motions without anyone really seeing me. And Kevin, he saw me. He made me feel interesting and desirable and alive again. So this is my fault? No. She looked up quickly. No, that's not what I'm saying. I made the choice. I take responsibility for that. But I want you to understand why it happened. I understand perfectly, I said. You were bored and selfish, so you decided to have an affair. You were planning to divorce me and take half of everything I've worked for. And you were stupid enough to think I'd never find out. Her face flushed. I never wanted to hurt you. You just wanted to replace me. I wanted to be happy. And now, are you happy? She looked around our living room, at the photos on the walls, at the life we'd built together. I don't know what I am anymore. Well, let me help clarify things for you, I said, standing up. You have two choices. Choice one. We go to marriage counseling. You cut off all contact with Kevin permanently, and we try to rebuild something from the wreckage of our relationship. It'll be hard work, and I make no promises about whether I'll ever trust you again, but we can try. And choice two. Choice two. We get divorced. I keep the house, since I'm the one who's been paying the mortgage while you were saving money in your secret account. We split the other assets according to what's fair, not what's convenient for you, and you get to explain to everyone why your marriage ended. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Those are terrible choices. They're the only choices you left me. What about Kevin? What about him? Are you going to forgive him? I laughed, and it came out cold. Kevin isn't my husband. Kevin doesn't get the option of counseling and reconciliation. Kevin just gets to live with the fact that he betrayed his best friend for a woman who's probably going to blame him for ruining her marriage. That's not fair. Fair? I stood up, suddenly angry. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you asking for a divorce before you started sleeping with my best friend. Fair would have been honesty instead of months of lies. Fair would have been treating me like a human being instead of an obstacle to your happiness. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I don't want fair anymore, Vanessa. I want justice, and justice looks like you facing the consequences of your choices. So what happens now? Now you decide which choice you're going to make. But you should know that either way, things are never going back to the way they were. The marriage you destroyed is gone forever. The question is whether we're going to build something new, or just walk away from the wreckage. She left without giving me an answer, but I could see in her face that she'd already made her decision. She was just trying to figure out how to tell me. That was fine. I'd already made my decision too. Thursday morning, I called Patricia Wells and scheduled another appointment. It was time to start the paperwork. The game was entering its final phase. The call came Friday afternoon while I was debugging a network security issue for a medical clinic. Vanessa's number appeared on my phone screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity won. I've made my decision, she said without preamble. I'm listening. I want the divorce. I'd been expecting this, but hearing her say it still felt like a punch to the stomach. 8 years of marriage ended with a sentence as casual as ordering coffee. Okay, I said. I'll call my attorney. Elliot, wait. Her voice caught. I want you to know that I did love you. I still love you. in a way. This isn't about not loving you. It's about loving someone else more. It's about being honest, finally. We both know this marriage has been over for a while. We were just too scared to admit it. She wasn't wrong. The woman I'd fallen in love with in college had been disappearing gradually for years, replaced by someone who found me boring and predictable. I'd been trying to win back someone who no longer existed. What about Kevin? I asked. A pause. What about him? Are you two going to ride off into the sunset together? I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter? It did matter, but not in the way she thought. It mattered because it meant my plan was working perfectly. I'll have Patricia draw up the papers, I said. We can try to keep this civilized. Thank you. After she hung up, I sat in my car outside the medical clinic and felt something I hadn't expected: relief. The uncertainty was over. The pretending was over. Now I could focus on making sure